And that's sympathy, helping somebody figure out what they need help on, and then the action, right? I can't stress enough the need to act. Acting to, I say it, knocking down roadblocks. They're like, well, what's your job? I'm like, my job is really to, if you have roadblocks in your way, to figure out what they are and how I can remove them. That's my job.
Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Care to Lead video interview series. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, empathy. And I couldn't have a better guest to discuss this topic today. Zarifa Brown Reynolds is CEO and president of Royal Neighbors of America. With a JD from Harvard Law School and a background in law, Zarifa brings a wealth of expertise to her role. She's actively involved in her community and she serves on several boards. And I can go on, but I'm going to post her full bio in the notes so that I can just get started with hearing from Zarifa herself. Zarifa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. Why don't you tell our listeners and the people that are watching about what Royal Neighbors of America is?
Royal Neighbors of America is a very special place. It is an insurance company that was founded more than 129 years ago by 8 pioneering women who could not get insurance from one of our neighboring insurance providers. And so these women founded this organization, and the mission of the organization remains the same after its more than 100-year history, and that is to insure lives, serve women, and serve communities. So first and foremost, we're an insurance company, but we do a lot more than just providing insurance. We view ourselves as an insurance company with a difference because we do a lot of work in communities and a lot of work supporting women.
Do you just do, like you said, life? Do you just do life insurance? Do you do business insurance? What other types of insurance do you do?
So currently we have life insurance products and annuity products, and we really focus on serving those who the traditional insurance providers don't service. So sticking closely with our founders who could not get insurance, most of our products are geared to lower middle income individuals. On the life side, our flagship product is a final expense product, but we do have the full suite of life insurance products, whole life and term life as well. But we focus a lot on serving those who others don't serve. On the annuity side, our primary product is a fixed annuity, which is very easy to understand. Again, kind of leaning into our history of being able to kind of serve people who a lot of other people don't serve. So we have a fixed annuity product that we also have on the annuity side. And those products, you could have either a 3-year, a 5-year, or a 10-year annuity product with us.
That's awesome what you guys are doing. I'm curious, Zarifa, if you can share the story of what got you started in the insurance industry with your Harvard Law degree. Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. I did go to Harvard, but, my interest in helping people goes back to being a child. I was raised in inner city Miami in a very, very poor area, and a lot of people helped me in my life. And so I've always wanted to pay it forward. I went to undergrad and then on to law school, and I thought law would be the avenue in which I could help people. But as a corporate lawyer, I found myself thinking that you could do more for individuals versus doing things for companies. And so I went to one of our clients, which was an insurance company in New York. And from there, I've been bit by the bug of the insurance industry and have been in this industry for a while. Insurance really does help people. It's foundational to providing financial support and stability, both on the life insurance side and on the annuity side. When you have a life event in your family where you will need to leverage a life insurance policy, it's very, very difficult for the family and the individuals that are affected during that time. So having sort of peace of mind around your financial situation really, really helps people during this time. And as an insurance company that's insurance with a difference, we do even more than that. We have a relationship with a company called Empathy. So we provide sort of bereavement counseling services and other supports around these life events, in addition to kind of paying the insurance claim. And on the annuity side, people are often trying to save for an event, retirement or otherwise. And so again, just providing that kind of stability to people to help them when they need help the most, when they no longer have an income from a job. So really, really leaning into helping people. And that's why I joined Royal Neighbors.
So you used a word in there, and I know it was, I'm going to take this out of context a little bit, but you get empathy, obviously, because you're working to make sure that you're empathetic with your clients when they need you most. But let's talk about empathy in the world in general and in your experiences. What I've come to see is that empathy a lot of times is treated like a buzzword. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I completely agree, Cynthia. I think people can use the word in different contexts and it is viewed as a buzzword. But for me, empathy goes back to helping people. And there's that human connection that's very important when you think about empathizing with someone. And for me, I think it's important for me to differentiate between empathy and sympathy, right? So if you have sympathy, you're like, oh, I feel sorry for you. You're going through a hard time. If you have empathy, to me, that's deeper. It means you have a connection with that individual, either through a shared experience or an experience that you guys both have together, and you have a relationship with that person, and you are able to convey to them through your words and or your actions that you really get it, and you're providing support at a critical time. So to me, empathy is much deeper than sympathy. It's not just like, oh, I feel sorry for you. It's like, okay, I get it, and I'm going to do something either through my words or actions or both to really help your situation.
I'm going to even go deeper on that a little bit because you're talking about a shared experience. Often leaders feel that unless they've gone through the exact same thing someone else has gone through, they can't have empathy in the same way. They can have sympathy, but we've all gone through something. We've all experienced pain. We've all experienced fear. We've all experienced insecurity. We have all experienced emotion. That's what we have to draw on when it comes to having empathy for someone else. It's like, I will never be a poor Black woman. I cannot have empathy in the same way that another poor Black woman could have for her. Yet, I have felt pain and I can feel compassion and empathy by drawing on that emotion and seeing her as a human, not as a poor Black woman or,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that no matter who you are, people are very blessed financially through who their parents are, right? Or different ethnicities where they have a different life experience. But we all experience not getting what we want at some point in time. Like whether or not that's like, okay, you thought you were the best athlete and like that didn't work out for you, or you worked really hard at something and that didn't work out for you, or you wanted something that you couldn't get, or you lost something that was very dear to you. And so I agree with you, this sort of leaning into those experiences where you had to it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, can lead to empathy. And certainly who I am as an African American woman is very different from a lot of other people. But even though I didn't have that same experience as maybe one of my male colleagues in some contexts, I still know what it's like to kind of work on a project and it not go well, or think I was going to get a job promotion and it didn't happen for me. And I can kind of lean into that to provide empathy at different points in time. So I don't think the experience has to be exactly the same, but I think that people have all, like you said, experienced things and didn't go well for them, or where they had a life event that was really traumatic for them, and leaning into that during times in which other people are having experiences is what I really view as providing empathy.
Right. And I don't think people should feel that, well, what I experienced wasn't anywhere near as tragic as what this person is going through, or as difficult or as challenging. Therefore, I don't even have the right to try to give this person empathy. What they need is to be treated as a human.
Absolutely.
What all of us need is connection. So it's not about comparing what you've gone through to what someone else has gone through. It's just knowing, hey, I felt pretty crappy and I've struggled. They might not be on the same scale, but the emotion is the same.
Right. And the experience is personal to that individual, right? So one person might have an experience where somebody's like, oh, that's not that big of a deal because I had such a more traumatic experience. But for that person, that was traumatic for them. And so I think personalizing it in your communication and in your actions is what provides empathy. And I agree that just because you don't have exactly the same shared experience doesn't mean that you can't have empathy. And we all should try to show empathy, because empathy is how you show up, your words, but also your actions. And sometimes people just need you to act differently, to provide an opportunity to see them as an individual, to see their experience, which may be a little bit different from yours, as not meaning that they're not qualified to do the job, but like they could still do the job. So that the action part of empathy, I think, is really important.
I found that one of the challenges I've seen over the years with a lot of not a lot of executives, but some of the executives that I've come across in my career, especially when I was in HR as opposed to coaching now. But I'd come across executives who would have when we talk about empathy for someone, an employee, they'd be like, no one ever did that for me. I didn't need that. Why should this person need that? Just suck it up and do your job. And there's no place for that in the workplace. I think a lot of that is changing, but it definitely was a piece of some mindsets. Have you come across that?
I have. And I think as the generations have changed and evolved, you hear this concept of like bringing your whole self to work. I mean, I don't think people necessarily bring their whole self to work because that could be a lot depending on who you are. But I think people are bringing more of themselves to work, and they're certainly more comfortable sharing a little bit more about their own personal journey and their personal life to open up the opportunity for people. So for instance, like I'm a working mom. I have had kids for majority of my career. And there are times when, I let people know, I'm like, oh, my kid is sick at school, so I need to go pick them up, or my kid had an accident and I got to take them to the emergency room. That I think helps to humanize the executive and gives all the individuals that you're working with the opportunity to see you more as just kind of like a talking head, but somebody who they can relate to. And in my experience, people work harder for organizations that they believe in and for people that they can relate to. So this concept of kind of opening yourselves up a little bit more at work, I've found to be really beneficial in building relationships with people and actually driving toward business outcomes, because people work for, I believe, in organizations that they believe in and people that they feel like they can relate to. They work harder. They just lean in a little bit more and just do a little bit more. And that benefits everybody.
There's a need for authenticity in showing that vulnerability. I had an executive that I know who wanted to show vulnerability and openness, and he was struggling with people relating to him in the first place. And one of the pieces of advice I gave him is just be more vulnerable. Let them see you as a human. And the action that this person took was to write this email to like the entire company that really spelled out a lot of his personal life and struggles that he's gone through. And he was way, way open. And he did it with the best of intentions. Like, I just want them to see me as a human. But what it did, it kind of, people didn't know how to respond, because it was just out of nowhere. And so I think that vulnerability and that it has to come in naturally. It has to come in the right moment. You can't become, I'm going to show you that I'm empathetic. I'm going to show you that I'm human. You can relate to me because this happened to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I don't think it really works. I'm a very much in the moment person, and I'm like every executive, I can definitely have my game face on, but particularly if I'm in a small group meeting and in a one-on-one or whatever, and something is happening with my kid, you'll see it on my face. I'll know that some result's going to come out, whether it's a big test or a standardized test or whatever. And if my kid is texting me, I might say, I'm really sorry to put you on pause for a minute. I need to respond to this, or I need to just step out for 30 seconds to deal with my kid. And then I come back and I'm like, I'm a mom first, right? And it's that in the moment, I think, that builds the authenticity, and for people to know that, like, if they're struggling with, balancing being a parent, because men are doing a lot in terms of taking care of kids as well, balancing being a parent with work. Like, I saw my executive doing that, and it's okay. It's okay. I have to step out of the room at some point if there's an emergency with my child. And I've seen it happen on both sides, where I've had to do it and where people feel comfortable doing it in front of me and seeing my reaction, which is why I talk about actions, not being one where it's like, okay, well, when I was coming through the ranks, we never let anybody know what was going on in our household. We just did our job. So I think your actions matter when somebody else is having an event where you need to show empathy, but also when you're having an event where you need to receive empathy, right? So it's a two-way street. And I can imagine that if an executive did not show up in an empathetic way, and then just wrote a long email saying, these are all the ways that I've had empathy experience in my life, how that would come across. It probably wouldn't come across as authentic. It's not in the moment. It's not that receiving empathy and giving empathy, which I also think builds relationships. And again, in my experience, people go above and beyond and work really harder for organizations where they believe in them and where they feel like they have a trusted, supportive relationship, relatable relationship with the executive that they're working with.
Yep. I think people want to help others succeed. And when you see that your leader has vulnerabilities, and that vulnerability might just be that, yeah, this is a really important moment, and I have a really important thing going on with my kid, and I'm going to have to excuse myself for a moment. So that's a vulnerability. It doesn't have to be a major, sharing of, your infertility or whatever, it doesn't have to be something like that. It can be vulnerability in that, hey, my furnace broke today. Like, I am human too, and I have no heat. So I'm going to sit here in my parka today. That just makes you more human. And you're right. People want to work with people. Now they're going to have empathy for you. That's stretching their muscles, which is good for your team because we want everyone on our teams to be able to have empathy. But what are your thoughts on the importance of a leader showing and showing up with empathy on a daily basis as far as bottom line?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. And it shows up in a number of ways because I talk about the action component of it. So when we're working toward a goal, and I emphasize with the team, and I believe this and I know this to be true, that successes of organizations in helping people through their products and services, particularly in the insurance space, it's not the CEO doing it or the executive team doing it. It's the entire company doing it. So when I talk about empathy and actions, if we're working toward a shared goal, like recently we were rolling out a new product and there are bumps along the roads. You're dealing with a third party that's providing some of the capabilities. You're doing some of the capabilities. It looks like you're not going to mate your timing. I say to the team, I'm like, what can we do to get this back on track? Do we need to put additional resources in the budget? Do we need to hire an additional resource, even though we didn't contemplate it? Do we need to see if people are available to work overtime? And if it's not too much for them to do it, to pay them additional funds so we can get this back on track. Oh, and by the way, if we're going to do overtime, let's do it because this was like around October. Let's do it in October so we don't ask people to do overtime around the holiday season. It's actions, right? It's not just I empathize with you. I'm going to be vulnerable when I'm having a bad time or if you're having a bad time, but it's actions around kind of moving the organization forward toward its shared goals where you can show empathy, where I've received positive feedback for folks that they're like, yeah, I really appreciated that you have the foresight to know that we weren't going to make our deadline and to see that we could do overtime, but to ask if we were going to do it, we did it before the holiday season. That's empathy, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to get jammed on their job around the holidays when they have family potentially flying in from different places and they're trying to host something at their house. Like when you could have, taken a step back and did it earlier. So to me, it's what you say, but it's also what you do and how you show up for people and for the organization when they need you the most.
I absolutely agree. What advice would you give to a new leader, say a new vice president or someone who's just coming into where they have a portfolio now? They have some people they're supervising for the first time. What advice would you give as some of the best practices for teaching your team members to be empathetic with one another? Besides role modeling, we know that. We want to model it.
Yeah, I think listen more than you speak, at least in the early days, and listen to understand. Don't start forming your own conclusions based on what's being shared with you until you hear the full story. I spend time with multiple people in the organization because I think sometimes new leaders think, okay, well, I'm just managing my team. But if you're managing leaders of leaders, like it's important to do skip level conversations and to try to get deeper in the organization because it's the people who are closest to the customer. In our case, in the insurance industry, our customer service teams really know what's going on. And when we were going to have an issue around our product rollout, like the people who answer the phones, they knew first, right? So I think having multiple relationships in the organization is really important as you continue to see your career evolve and you become more senior. Don't forget about where you were and staying connected with those individuals. And then I would say, secondly, listen to understand. And in the early days, listen more than you speak.
Listening to understand is something people will say they do, but very few people really do. And it's a skill and it's a learned skill. When we work with executive teams, one of the exercises we will do in a group setting, we'll pair them up and have them listen to another person until they tell their complete story. They cannot respond in any way. They have to just hear the whole thing. And it's so hard for them. Then we do other things and go deeper. But that first time to really listen to somebody, and you're not allowed to respond. You're not allowed to nod your head. You're not allowed to smile. You're just going to listen. They realize how often they're ready to jump in, how often they have a story they want to compare, how often where their head's going in a million different places because they're not allowed to speak for that or do anything for that few minutes.
I would also say that when you listen, like sometimes somebody will present a situation where they're looking for a resolution, but as they talk through it, and if you allow them to talk through it, they might come up with the answer on their own. And even if you have to ask them a couple of questions to prod them getting to a right place, I call it the Socratic method. I did go to law school. Having them to get their own aha moment, I think is something that new leaders don't necessarily know to do. And then I
Right.
think a lot of new leaders are also trying to prove themselves as a leader. So they're looking for things that they could count in the success category. But you have to realize that as a leader, your success is your team's success. And so I'm not in the business of kind of taking credit. It's the team's credit. It's the individual's credit. Even if I had to ask questions to get you to the answer, when you gave the answer, I'm giving you the credit. I'm giving you the acknowledgement in the organization and with other more senior individuals. And then leaning into what does it take to develop the career of others? When you're a new leader, like you spend all this time trying to develop your career to get to be a leader. But once you're supporting other people, it's less about you and it's more about them. And I think making that pivot is something that you have to be conscious of as a new leader. And
100%.
empathy plays a huge role in helping people to get to their best self in the examples that I just gave.
Yeah, I think you hit on several like really good target items there. First of all, leaders, when they first get into a leadership position, they are really eager to fix things, to solve problems, to show their worth. I always tell leaders, once you get into this leadership role, you now have 2 full-time jobs, right? You have your job that you're responsible for your day-to-day projects or whatever you're involved in. But your other job is developing your leaders, developing the people around you. And if you can't be promoted tomorrow and have someone fill in for you, you're not doing your job. Like your job is to be developing them. And the other thing you said was asking them more questions. One of the ways we always have leaders in the beginning, especially when you're going to have one-on-ones with your people, a lot of the times one-on-one meetings between a leader and a manager are like, well, what's going on? What's on your plate? And they just do this conversation. But if you can kind of flip that a little bit to be really structured, like, what do you need my support on? How can I support you? And remember that they don't always know. They don't always know what to ask. I don't know what I need help on. So it's your job as the leader to ask really good questions when you have these one-on-ones, not just
I
like
agree completely.
expect them all to know.
And that's empathy. Helping somebody figure out what they need help on and then the action, right? I mean, because I can't stress enough the need to act. Acting to I say it knocking down roadblocks. They're like, well, what's your job? I'm like, my job is really to, if you have roadblocks in your way, to figure out what they are and how I can remove them. That's my job.
And that's leading from behind. It really is. Or beside and behind. It's not leading from the front. It's like, follow me, I'm in charge, and this is how we're going to do things. It's like, okay, this is your show. What do you need from me? What's in your way? What can I clear? How can I clear the path for you? That's successful leadership.
I agree. The other thing I'll say, and I think young leaders struggle with this a little bit because you're still thinking about your career ascension. Like, how do I, now you're a leader, you got people reporting to you. This is a huge accomplishment, but how do I stay in this role and how do I continue to advance? And new leaders tend to, and I'll be vulnerable here, I had the mindset initially of being nervous when people start talking about succession. Like, succession? Like, somebody wants to take my job. And then they become like really protective and like, no, like you will have more opportunity if you have people who can do your job. And that's a different mindset and a different skill set, and using kind of questioning and working with people to get them to understand that and being empathetic with them as they, go through this journey of realizing they really should have a successor. Because it's hard. I mean, it's, initially you're like, you want to replace me? I've only been in this job for 6 months and now I got to think about who could take my job. People struggle with that a lot. And it requires an empathetic leader to help them to get through that process to where they understand that that's a part of their growth and a part of the growth of the organization and the growth of the team.
And I think that has to be built into the culture as well. And I'll share with you one of my early, when I first got into executive leadership, really early in my career. One of my weaknesses was I was so afraid to admit or ask for help, or like, I didn't think about using outside resources. So one of the first things when I had my first HR leadership role, I was in the job for like maybe 3 weeks, and the CEO said to me, so we're going to do a merger. I had never done a merger. I had never even been an HR person before. I just landed in his job miraculously. And he said, we're going to do a merger. I need you to go to Alabama, and I need you to do some due diligence on the HR. And I want you to find out the cost per butt. Like, that was like what I was given as my assignment. I had no clue. Now, being much more seasoned, I would have known, all right, I'm going to reach out to these professionals. These are the people who can help me. It's like that BDO commercial. BDO has the answer. Like, I would have reached out. But instead, like, I spent like so many hours trying to research like the best practices. And granted, I learned baptism by fire, but there's also resources. You're not weak if you ask for help. It's just insecurity when you don't.
Absolutely. Could not agree with that more. And I was lucky that in my first leadership role, I was looking for something and I couldn't find it for like a week. And the deadline was approaching. And I asked one person, he happened to be the treasurer of an organization that I worked for, and he became a dear, dear friend. And he had all of my answers. And then I knew, I'm like, whenever I'm stuck, and he had a lot of empathy for me because he was like, yeah, I'm glad I could help you in this respect. Because before I got this role, like I was looking for something and I never knew it. And then I found one person who gave me everything I needed. We needed some documentation for a transaction going back years, right? So you need somebody who had history with the company and all that stuff. So finding that person or those individuals of the organization who really know where the bones are buried is also what I try to help new leaders to do, because you're right. Like people think, oh, and then there's Google and no, who's that one or two people that know everything, where everything is? And how do you build a relationship with them so you can move faster and be more impactful to the organization? So I try to help people to realize who that person should be for them and to cultivate those relationships.
And people want to help. They really feel empowered whenever they get to help you. So you're actually doing them a service as well and helping develop them and let them use their skills. They want to be a part of supporting you.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give, Zarifa, to someone looking into starting into the insurance industry the way you did?
So like yourself, you say you kind of fell into HR. In some ways, I fell into insurance. I mean, I always had this remit of wanting to help people and had gone to law school and was a practicing lawyer because I thought that was my avenue. And then recognizing that when I worked for an insurance client, that this really was a way that I could help people more long-term and from a career and personal perspective. If you want to get in the insurance industry, there are lots of ways to do it because an insurance company has different components of what to do. So you don't have to be a finance major and go to the finance component of an insurance company. You don't have to be in HR and go to represent an insurance company in the HR part of the organization. You don't even have to be in sales and do insurance sales. An insurance organization has career paths for all of these areas. You should just do the type of work that you enjoy. And then if you want to be associated with an insurance company, just apply for a role in the insurance industry. There's a lot of entrepreneurship in the insurance industry as well. We sell our products and services through independent marketing agencies. And so these are people who have started their own companies and they're out in the field talking to humans, individual people, and selling the insurance products. So you could even be an entrepreneur and find yourself in the insurance industry. So there are lots of paths to this industry, which is one that, as I started by saying, just does so much good in society and providing financial stability support and empathetic support, particularly in the life insurance side.
Well, you can tell just by speaking to the leadership of the organization that empathy and compassion are core values of the organization. So
absolutely. Going all the way back to our history with our founders.
So for our listeners who want to learn more about your work, how can they connect with you and your company?
We have a website. If you do a Google search for Rural Neighbors of America, it'll come up and you can find us on the website. There's a contact us button on the website that you can use. If you're looking for me specifically, I think LinkedIn is the best way to find me. My name is Zarifa, Zarifa Reynolds, quite a unique first name. So if you put it in, I'm sure I'll probably be the only search result that will come up. You can also Google my name, Zarifa Reynolds, and Rural Neighbors, the insurance company, will come up as well as my LinkedIn profile as well. So would love to hear from everyone.
And we will have all of those links posted in the show notes for you. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Care to Lead video series today. If you found this episode valuable and you want to stay updated on our latest interviews and insights, remember to follow us on YouTube, and you can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, leaders who care to lead. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Zarifa.
Thank you, Cynthia. Enjoyed talking to you today.